Hey there, thanks for coming. Take a seat.
It's time to retire to the drawing room.
Choosing a path in the entertainment industry is risky business, both for your hip pocket and for your health. Recent research found that the rate of suicide attempts within the Australian entertainment industry is double that of the general population. Ben Steel knows firsthand the toll that a creative career can take. He's my guest in the drawing room, along with Susan Cooper, General Manager of Entertainment Assist. Thanks for coming in, guys.
Pleasure.
How many people took part in your research?
Nearly 3,000. So that's across all sectors of the entertainment industry, from performers through to technicians and crew, which is a fantastic representation, given that I think the ABS states our industry has 42,000 people in it. So, yeah, a great response.
What were some of the more alarming findings?
I think certainly we talked about the suicide attempts being double that of the general population. We found that our rates of depression are 5 times that of the general populace, and moderate to severe anxiety is 10 times that of the general population. You know, majority of our industry are shift workers. A third of all industry workers earn less than $20,000 a year. 68% of performers actually earn less than the minimum wage of $34,000. We have major problems in relation to sleep and insomnia, and so combined with low pay, job insecurity, lack of sleep, that there's a resulting challenge as far as social connections with family and friends. There's a lot of isolation. All in all, some major challenges.
It's really significant challenges. Ben, you're a filmmaker. You've suffered anxiety and depression. Do you think that's because of your career choice?
Yeah, I definitely think that the unique pressures that we face in the entertainment industry contribute to not good mental health. Yeah, I think it's the instability. I think it's the pressure that we also put on ourselves. You know, there's kind of, question, with the film that I'm making at the moment, there's a question whether how much of our creativity actually contributes to having bad mental health. As far as we're born with creative genes, we have to be a bit more sensitive. We look at the world in a different way. Maybe these factors contribute also to not having, solid mental health.
Well, I asked you, Susan, about the findings, and obviously that headline figure of just how staggering that double the rate of the general population is pretty significant. But what other findings did you find interesting or surprising?
I think one of the ones for me, which is quite interesting, is that the majority of our industry now are tertiary educated. Once upon a time, I think that there was this thing of drop out of school and go and join a band or join the circus or whatever you do. But I found that particularly fascinating. We've got quite a disparate industry, so there's very number of sectors from dance, music, acting, obviously the technical side of things. So there's no overarching kind of sort of body for our industry. So there's only actually one funnel, which majority now of our industry actually go through, which is tertiary education. And I think that's a great opportunity for us to actually look at how do we build into that curriculum ways in which early entrants into the industry can be equipped to understand the pressures of this industry and become a little bit more, let's call it match fit, to work in this industry. Because at the moment we're not focusing on that. We're focusing, of course, a lot on the creative and the technical and the craft side of the industry, which is so important. But we do need to balance that out with some skills on how our workers can learn to adapt to the challenges of the industry and be more aware of what they're coming into and facing. So
you're talking about building resilience effectively.
Look, in an ideal world, that's it, yeah. But it's also having that understanding that you're not going to be employed every single day of your work life. That's fact of life. And so what things can you put in place? How can you be prepared for that? I'm not even talking about financial literacy. I'm just talking about the I am syndrome. And we tend to find that much more with performers than technical crew and roadies. Performers are less likely to earn income outside of the industry, whereas the technical side and support workers are more likely, if they're struggling, to actually look to outside the industry. So it's a big issue for performers. And one of their challenges, of course, is being available for the gig, which is the common feedback that you get, we've got to wait and be available. So it's what things can be put in place that help to have that sense of purpose. Because I think a lot of these issues come from, that lack of purpose and, I feel a failure. I haven't got this, I'm not doing this, I'm seeing someone else doing that. And constantly judging ourselves or feeling that we're being judged by others.
Yeah, I certainly feel that the identity issue of being both an actor and a filmmaker for myself is very critical to some of my struggles, and certainly something that I'm working through, as we speak. We do identify with what we do, and that's part of who we are, and it's in our blood. So when we're not doing that, I think it does have bad effects on our mental health.
Yeah, and that's where it's about learning, isn't it? That you're also a great partner and you're also a great son, or there's lots of other things that you can, if you wanted to label yourself. And we forget those things because we do get caught up with the creative side of what we do. And it's so important to actually, identify with that because, well, that's living the dream, isn't it? And that's what we want to do. And it's also part of the giving. And one of the things the research showed us is that the common denominator across everybody who works in the industry is passion. Everybody is so passionate and wanting to do it to actually have the audience have that applause at the end. It doesn't matter whether you're behind the scenes or on the stage or in front of the camera or behind it. It's exactly the same thing. And that passion drives, obviously, the creativity and the sensitivity. But then, of course, we put these passionate, creative, sensitive people in this incredibly cutthroat environment where there's bullying, there's harassment, there's so much competition, there's negativity, criticism, and there's always going to be 20 people plus behind you wanting your job. So if you fall over, bang, you're out.
Oh, God. I'm stressed just thinking about it. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Drawing Room. My guest, Sir Ben Steel, is a filmmaker and the director of The Show Must Go On. And also, I'm joined by Susan Cooper, who's the general manager of Entertainment Assist. Ben, tell us about your documentary that you're making, The Show Must Go On. It's about this very issue.
Yeah, it's very timely. I mean, the whole mental health issue debate interest has been with me for quite a while. I've seen many of my colleagues throughout the years, struggle with various issues. About 3 years ago myself, I started to, be struggling, and I've been seeking help for the last 3 years. I was really excited and relieved when I finally discovered Entertainment Assist was out there and the great work that they were doing last year and their initial findings of exactly this topic. So at the beginning of this year in March, I started making this documentary and interviewing my colleagues and friends in the industry to really get an understanding of everyone's different perspectives and what we can do to kind of change these statistics. I was further fueled literally 2 days before my first interview that one of my acting coaches in Sydney tragically took his own life. And that was really poignant and a struggle that is still difficult to deal with. So making this film has been cathartic. It's been amazingly supported by people in the industry, but it's also been quite difficult. I'm still struggling myself and dealing with the death of one of my mentors.
Have you found that your colleagues, people you've worked with, are willing to talk about these issues? Because the thing about mental health is, of course, we've tried to change this as a culture, but there's a lot of stigma about talking about it. Are people prepared to talk?
Yeah, there's been an amazing response from many people in the industry willing to talk about this because they feel like it is such an important issue. And we all know people that we have lost. Too many people have been lost to this. There have been, interestingly enough, in the production side of the film and TV industry, a little bit of hesitation to go on camera to speak about it.
Is that because people perhaps, I'm just stabbing here, but knowing how people at least report their feelings?
It's too close to home.
Yeah, people are afraid to...
And that's the challenge, that's right, because actually they're represented in the stats. It's them. That number is them. I mean, print media, no problems at all, happy to do that, but certainly that television in particular, it's way too close to home. And it's also the general public's understanding, and that's important that we do educate because there can be a little bit of the, you've had your 15 minutes of fame, too bad, so sad. And that's hard, and it's harsh, but that is a reality. The wonderful thing that has happened, though, and the research that we've done is world first. I mean, I was amazed. There's never been a study done on the impact the industry has across every person working in the industry. So the findings are so in your face that the conversation has well and truly started. We can't go backwards. There's too much information out there. The conversations are going on. There is an absolute responsibility for us as individuals working in the industry to not only look after ourselves now, but to make sure we support our peers, and also that employers and member organisations actually work to actively support the mental health and wellbeing of their employees.
Well, let's go to that, because you said it earlier, this has always been a difficult industry. This isn't a new story. This is an industry that, chews you up and spits you out, if I can be crude. It really does. And that's anyone who's known anyone who's been in a high-profile role in this industry, and I have, knows how harsh it is on them when they're not in that 5 minutes of fame. It's about equipping people with the skills, the toolkit to deal with that. Is that all it takes? Because it's not going to change. The industry, I can't imagine, is going to become stable all of a sudden, all embracing.
Well, we've got too much supply for the demand. Producers can call a rate for whatever they're prepared to pay, whatever that is. And there's always going to be a gazillion people standing behind you, as I said earlier, wanting your gig if you fall over. That's never going to change. What has to change is how we approach it. We need to be much more mindful of taking care of self. And all the services exist out there. At the moment, about 60% of our industry are seeking help for their mental health issues, which is great. Certainly our technicians and roadies need to do a bit more in that area, but we need to not be afraid to actually have the conversation. And it's so important that we learn to talk, that we find a peer support or a family member or a friend, whoever that is. If we haven't got that, we actually then go to the GP, get out on a mental health plan and find a great psychologist or counsellor that we can actually have as that confidant. I'm on a mental health plan. I couldn't do my job if I wasn't on one. Anxiety and depression are treatable illnesses. They are absolutely treatable. And even though we're a cutthroat industry, one of the things that our research showed is that people in the industry really want to support their peers but just don't know how to do it.
Is this all sounding very familiar, Ben? You said 3 years ago you started facing these issues. Susan just mentioned needing somebody to talk to. Did you feel like you had that kind of network, someone to turn to?
Yeah, I think the things that we need to change, which Susan highlighted, some of those, is just that isolation. I think we're also...
So it can be a very lonely industry to work in.
Yeah, it can be really, really lonely. And I think the other thing as well, and which is the title of the film, The Show Must Go On, we have this innate strength but also weakness within us that we'll just get on with it and we'll just put the show on no matter what. So seeking help and asking for help is a difficult thing, I believe, just, that's in our core.
Is that part of the issue that when you're on and the show is going on, adrenaline kicks in, that I suppose almost mental health issues can be put on pause while you perform, and then when you're not in a performance phase or working on a big project, people have told me that they face kind of almost a relapse because they're not busy living on that drug, that
definitely.
Natural drug adrenaline.
Yeah, and I think if we go back to why adrenaline is in our body, it's fight or flight.
Yep.
So we're not used to having so much adrenaline in us.
And also, that whole sense of post-show blues, which is a very common phenomenon because people are taken on a journey, particularly a performance perspective, is an unreal journey over a period of time. Quite often at the other end are not put back to reality. And it's a really difficult thing when you've got this new set of friends and family, inverted commas, that have been a part of your world, particularly if you're touring. And then at the end of that, you're sort of out there on the street and go, right, okay.
So that was a false reality
or
a temporary reality.
The fact of life is that's exactly right. It's a temporary reality. It's not the reality of someone's world. And what's happening is that people are shifting from realities all the time. And there's, that's a whole thing of a performance psychologist, why they're so important. And we've seen the change, particularly with, say, the Australian swimming team. And they were performing very, very well. That was great. Then performance psychologists were moved away and we saw some sort of unruly behaviour that came from those young people who are just incredible people in an amazing situation of a very public spotlight. Put the performance psychologist back in on the team and yahoo, everything's working again and well, and people are presenting themselves, in a better light. So we need that. We need someone to guide our processes from that perspective.
What's the role of alcohol and drugs in all of this, Susan? What's the research around that? Is that a contributing factor?
Look, it is a mechanism for coping. And I think what's been quite interesting, contrary to perhaps how the media might portray the entertainment industry in that light, the problem that's had with drugs is their use is not to switch off. The use is to actually do the job. Particularly for our, let's say, techs and roadies who are, people sort of forget that they're the ones that have bumped in and put, a show on into a venue. They're the ones that are working the show through the day. They're the ones that pack it up and drive it to the next venue all night and then do it all again. And that's the only way they can stay awake.
Just before we go, Ben, do you ever think, why not just change careers? This is all just too hard.
Yeah, it's funny, and I do ask people in the documentary that same question, so it's funny that you've posed it to me as well.
I'm not suggesting you do, by the way.
Yeah, no, it's who I am. This is what I'm meant to do. This is, ironically, when I'm my happiest.
Even if it poses the other flip side of that happiness.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't think I could do anything else.
Well, I want to thank you both for coming in and talking so frankly about something that's obviously a huge issue in your industry, but I think we can all agree a big issue just generally in the community. Thank you so much.
Thanking you.
And Susan Cooper joined me there. She's the General Manager of Entertainment Assist, and Ben Steel also, who's a filmmaker and director. And the film he's actually working on at the moment is called The Show Must Go On.